Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where the Russian ceasefire continues. But at the same time, today is the 11th of May of 2026, which means that today is the last day of the Russia's proposed ceasefire, and which means that tomorrow most likely the clashes between the Ukrainians and the Russians will continue. And today, this morning, more precisely, we received a very interesting update from the city of Kyiv. German Defense Minister Pistorius arrived in Kyiv on an announced visit to strengthen cooperation within the strategic partnership. You know that these days we receive lots of updates about Germany, Ukraine, Russia, the European Union talks, negotiations, and so on. Just during the previous 2 days, the President of Russia made lots of interesting statements on the matter of negotiations between the European Union and the Russian Federation. And according to information we have, Putin named former German Chancellor Schröder the preferred negotiator for dialogue between Russia and Europe. And as for this position, as for Schröder, the Germany is considering his position, but they want to make a bigger team of negotiators from the side of the European Union, and they want to involve the President of Germany also as a part of possible negotiation group. Germany considering Steinmeier role in future Russia talks, that was stated by Der Spiegel. Germany's ruling coalition is reportedly discussing whether the President Frank-Walter Steinmeier could play a role in future peace negotiations with Russia, according to Der Spiegel. Coalition members reportedly did not believe former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, whom Vladimir Putin allegedly prefers as a negotiator, could handle such a task alone. Sources say a possible mediation duo involving Schröder and Steinmeier is being viewed as an interesting option. You know that this is a very interesting position because according to this article, according to the President of the Russian Federation, the European Union would be represented not by the European Commission or not by Brussels, not by the European Union as a unit of this negotiation process, but will be represented with Germany. Two main candidates, two main players will be represented by Germany. And of course, this is something that the European Union will not live with. European Union most likely will deny this proposal. At least we have a statement made by Kallas. Kallas spoke out against appointing Schröder as the European Union's negotiator with Russia. Putin proposed his candidacy. If we grant Russia the right to appoint a negotiator on our behalf, that wouldn't be very wise. She called Schröder a high-ranking lobbyist for Russian state-owned companies. Kallas noted that the European Union will discuss negotiations with Russia at the end of May. Meanwhile, Germany media reports that Germany hasn't ruled out the former chancellor and is considering sending President Steinmeier to negotiations with Schröder. So we need to understand that this is a very interesting and smart step made by Putin because from the logic, the European Union must be represented by the diplomats and politicals of the European Union, but not of a single union member like Germany. And most likely the European Union will try to insert the representatives of the European Union into the negotiation teams. Most likely we are talking about Kaja Kallas. Most likely she wants to be a part of this negotiation team, but we know the attitude, Russia's attitude to this person. Most likely the Russians will not accept this. So let's return back to Ukraine, and it seems that the visit of Pistorius this morning in Kyiv also is not just a part of the process of strengthening cooperation within the strategic partnership, but probably he also arrived in Kyiv for the purpose to get the opinion of the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, on this matter, whether he accepts this position or he has his own vision or his own position on this matter. So most likely this question will be also resolved and discussed during the upcoming meetings between President of Ukraine and the Minister of Defense of Germany. So today is the 11th of May of 2026, and both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are preparing themselves before the beginning of very heavy clashes that will start on the 12th of May of 2026. Pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that during the upcoming nights, the Russians will launch thousands of drones and hundreds of missiles all over the entire territory of Ukraine, but probably the Ukrainians will do the same. They will also attack deep inside of the territory of Russia using hundreds of drones, probably, and just dozens of missiles probably as well. And right after several waves of attacks, most likely the Russians and the Ukrainians will continue offensives. And the next days are going to be very important because, according to information we have, the Russians are ready to begin several major offensives. So the first one is the Sloviansk Kramatorsk offensive operation. This territory has been encircled by Russians from the north, from the south, and from the east. The Russians during the previous days managed to create a pocket, the Sloviansk-Konstantinovka pocket. So we are talking about this territory. The Sloviansk-Konstantinovka pocket is the territory between the river of Seversky Donetsk, the villages of Bogorodichna, Svetogorsk, Titanovka, Prishep, where the Russians crossed the river of Seversky Donetsk and managed to create a foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river, and to the south in the direction of the city of Konstantinovka. So this is the pocket, and as we can see, this pocket is encircled by Russians from the north and from the south, which means that the Russians, if they continue offensive operation further, let's say from the south in the northern direction and from the north, from the area of Liman in the southern direction, then of course with every single day the Russians will tighten more and more news around the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this agglomeration. And of course the Russians most likely won't reduce their pressure from the east, they will continue offensive operation. And this is basically the final battle of the entire special military operation, as was many times reported by the president of the Russian Federation. So as soon as the Ukrainians leave the rest of Donbas, the Russians will be ready to begin the negotiation process with the European Union and with Ukraine itself. And Zelensky, as you can see, is trying to win some time and to hold these positions for as long as possible. So this is the first possible operation, possible offensive that might start right at the beginning of the 12th of May of 2026, and several sources during the previous 12 hours recorded additional changes on the ground. The Russians improved their positions, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, to the east of the city of Kramatorsk along Seversky Donetsk-Donbas Canal. And furthermore, I would like to remind you that during the May's holidays, right before the beginning of the 9th of May, the sources stated that the Russians captured the settlement of Kriva Luka, and furthermore the Russians captured, and we have a video with flags through the settlement, which means that the Russians have indeed a very strong control over the territory. So everything is ready for this offensive operation. The Russians are about to finish the regrouping that the Russians started right at before the beginning of May's holidays, and most likely today in the evening they will finish this process, and tomorrow we will see a major offensive. At the same time, pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that the Kramatorsk direction is not the only place where the Russians may launch their major offensive. The second area is the Zaporizhzhia direction, and the pro-Ukrainian sources stated that an offensive on Zaporizhzhia is being prepared. Russia is moving infantry and equipment. That was stated by different Ukrainian media. Up to 40 units are being sent daily toward Berdiansk, the Ukrainians report. This isn't just about armored vehicles, but also trucks carrying infantry. The Ukrainians clarify that forces are being concentrated in the Melitopol-Tokmak-Vasilievka triangle. So let's return back to the map. The Melitopol-Tokmak-Vasilievka triangle is this territory. So according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians are trying to concentrate their forces right now, their troops in this region. Vasilievka, Tokmak and Melitopol. So here the Russians have concentrated a very powerful group of forces that the Russians are ready to use right at the beginning of the 12th of May, but most likely won't do this. They will wait the end of massive attacks and then they will do this. So which means that in coming days very heavy clashes will take place in this region, most likely according to pro-Ukrainian sources. So but the most important thing is that the Ukrainians understand that if the Russians launch these major offensives and if the Ukrainians lose the initiative, then most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to start the Zaporizhzhia defense operation and to start the Kramatorsk Sloviansk defense operations. And of course, as the Ukrainians did many times in the past, they have a third option, because the only way how to not allow the Russians to begin their offensives in the area of Zaporizhzhia and Kramatorsk is to launch their own offensive operation. Because if Ukrainians, let's say on the 12th of May of 2026, launch their own offensive or counteroffensive operation in some area, they can disrupt the Russia's plans and to force the Russians, let's say, to redeploy their forces back. And as of the beginning of May and as of the April of 2026, we received lots of updates on this matter. For example, several pro-Ukrainian sources and several experts stated that the Ukrainians may try to cross the river of Dnipro in the area of the settlement of Krynki, Zaporizhzhia, and with the purpose to establish a foothold on the Russian side of the river. So this is a possible situation. If Ukrainians are able to do this, of course, this will force the Russians to change their plans, let's say, regarding the Zaporizhzhia direction, and the Russians would be forced to redeploy their forces back in the direction of Zaporizhzhia with the purpose to stabilize the situation. And an offensive operation from the Ukrainian side is the only way how to force the Russians to change their plans. And as for the Dnipro direction, as for the city of Kherson, telling the truth that since the beginning of April, we have received lots of updates about the situation in this region. So these are the number of icons that we have received since the beginning of the 1st of April of 2026. And we see that we have a lot of icons. We have a lots of attacks carried out by Russians. We have a lots of explosions. We have a lots of Ukrainian reconnaissance drones flying over the territory. So we have a lots of updates, and it seems that obviously something is brewing in this area. And for example, as for the previous days, we received lots of videos where we can see the city of Oleshki, and it seems that the city of Oleshki, which is located right in front of the city of Kherson, might be the primary target for the Ukrainians for their possible landing operation, because there are lots of multi-story buildings, lots of positions that Ukrainians can use, and where Ukrainians can dig in deeper with the purpose to hold this foothold for as long as possible. So everything is possible. The Russians also follow the situation. They see the developments of the Ukrainians on their side of the river, and that is why the Russians are bombing and attacking these territories with all types of weapons they have. So summarizing everything, right at the beginning of the 12th of May of 2026, we might see and we might face up to 3 offensive operations, 2 from the Russian side and at least 1 from the side of the armed forces of Ukraine. So let's wait and see, of course, how the things are going to develop, because obviously we will understand everything within the next 20 hours. Now let's move to Europe. Very important updates these days are coming from the United Kingdom. According to information we have, the British ruling party suffered a crushing defeat in the local elections. Starmer may resign, according to BBC. The ruling Labour Party lost up to 1,500 seats. The British Conservatives suffered the second largest losses, losing 563 seats. And as we can see, the Starmer issue may be raised as early as today. He had previously told the media that he had no intention of resigning. And as we can see, another person who supports Zelensky and the conflict on the territory of Ukraine is about to lose his seat. Furthermore, we had a report from the Russian side. For example, Kirill Dmitriev, the special representative of the Russian Federation in the negotiation process with Ukraine and with the US authorities, stated that Keir Starmer could resign in the coming days. As predicted, Labour's Prime Minister and some cabinet ministers have spoken out against Starmer following his disastrous defeat in the local elections. Starmer will resign on schedule next week. So this is the situation. Of course, if it happens, this will weaken positions of Ukraine for probably several weeks until the new Prime Minister will establish his cabinet and will establish a line with Zelensky and communication and the process of support of Ukraine during the conflict with the Russian Federation. But this time may be enough for Russians to do something on the ground. Now let's move to the United States of America and to the Middle East. We have lots of very important updates. According to information we have, the President of the United States of America these days is going to travel to China, where he's going to have a meeting with the President of China, Xi Jinping. Trump is expected to confront Xi Jinping this week over China's support for Iran, including oil purchases and possible weapons exports, according to the senior U.S. officials. The two leaders will meet Thursday and Friday in Beijing amid tensions over trade, Taiwan, artificial intelligence, and the U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran. And the most important question we have right now before this meeting between the President of the United States of America and the President of China, whether the United States of America will attack Iran before this meeting or right after. U.S. President Donald Trump will arrive in China for an official visit on May 13th, so the day after tomorrow. Once again, either the U.S. will attack Iran before or after this meeting, because according to information we have, the United States of America has rejected the proposal that was made by Tehran these days. So the Iranians made it clear that they're not going to abandon their nuclear program, they're not going to do anything that was proposed by the United States of America, and that they want to receive compensation and to establish a legal control over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran rejects dismantling its nuclear facilities and offers a shorter enrichment moratorium than the 20-year suspension Washington demanded, while proposing to dilute some of its highly enriched uranium and transfer the rest to a third country with guarantees it would be returned if talks fail. The sources are saying that Russia is a possible candidate for this third country. Iran stated that nuclear issue will be only discussed after an agreement to end the war. So as you can see, this is not something like a proposal from the Iranian side. These are the terms of the US capitulation. So that is why the President of the United States of America rejected this idea, and of course before the beginning of talks in China he may start something with Iran as well. It's accurate to say you think the combat operation in Iran are over and done. This is the question that the President Donald Trump was asked during his latest interview. No, I didn't say that. I said they are defeated, but that doesn't mean they're done. We could go in for 2 more weeks and do every single target. This is the statement of the President of the United States of America. We will get Iran's enriched uranium at some point whenever we want. For example, today the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, also stated, and he not just stated, he said that the ground operation is possible. The ground operation is possible. Netanyahu said that Trump told him that he will go there and take it, which means that this is something like a possible ground operation. Iran has been playing games with the United States and the rest of the world for 47 years, delay, and then finally hit pay dirt when Barack Hussein Obama became president. Another important statement is that I have just read the response from the Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it, totally unacceptable. So which means that the conflict may start very, very soon. And at the same time, we start receiving report. Today is the Monday of the 11th of May of 2026. The financial markets opened, and when financial market opens, oil prices began growing significantly. And this morning, oil prices of WTI started its trade on the level of almost $99 per barrel, and most likely the oil prices will continue growing until some understanding of the situation between the Iranian side and the United States of America. But at the same time, we see and we understand that still Israel is not ready to finish the conflict with the Iranian side. That was stated by Benjamin Netanyahu many times. And during the previous weekend, we received lots of updates from the southern parts of Lebanon, and we have significant changes on the ground. So this is the situation by the end of the 9th of May of 2026, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 11th of May of 2026. The Israeli Defense Forces improved their positions in the area of received the village by the name of Ham, which is located to the east of the Litani River. The Israeli forces managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of the settlement of Nabi. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. And another important thing, the Israeli Defense Forces improved their positions in the southern parts. Lots of changes, as you can see, were recorded. But the most important changes that we have received during this weekend is that the Israeli Defense Forces managed to cross the river of Litani and answer the settlement of Zaftar el-Shariah. So this village, at least its southern part, is already under complete control of the Israeli Defense Forces, and this is probably the beginning of the end of the buffer zone operation. There are still lots of job to do, but we see the first foothold on the northern side of the river, which is a very important step, but we still see that there are still lots of job to do for the Israelis before the ending of this buffer zone operation. Meanwhile, we received a report that a nuclear submarine has entered the Mediterranean Sea, and a higher class missile submarine was observed entering Gibraltar today on its way to the Mediterranean Sea. The higher class are among the largest and most powerful submarines in the US Navy, capable of carrying up to 24 Trident 2D5 ballistic missiles with a range of 7,000 miles, which means that this submarine can also be involved in operation against Iran in coming days. At the same time, the US CVN-78 US Gel Air Fort is returning back to the United States of America. And you know that it's not just returning back to the United States of America. The US authorities say that they're returning back this aircraft group because this aircraft group needs to be repaired. But the sources are saying that most likely this aircraft group is going to return to the area of Cuba, and this aircraft strike group will support the Cuba possible operation, because these days we received lots of updates that the number of American reconnaissance flights off the coast of Cuba has increased sharply. Since February 4th, the US Navy and Air Force have made at least 25 flights of planes and drones near the country's major cities, according to Flight Radar 24. This is similar to what was observed before US military operations in Venezuela and Iran. The US has previously stated intentions to take actions against Cuba, where the country expected to surrender once the American aircraft US Abraham Lincoln approaches its shores. But Lincoln most likely is not going to do this, because currently just the Air Force is moving in the direction of Cuba, and Lincoln stays in the area of Iran on its southeastern part, and will continue staying here for as long as possible, for as long as it needs to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. So as we can see, the situation is very difficult, and it's not just about political things, not just about USA, China, Iran, Europe, Russia, and Ukraine. It's also about a new virus that is moving from the southern parts of the Atlantic Ocean in the northern direction. Today, for example, we received a report that up to 150 passengers evacuated from a ship, Hundius, near the coast of Tenerife, where the Hantavirus detected. Tourists will be examined by the health service and then sent to quarantine. The Spaniards will be sent home if they show no symptoms, or quarantined at a military base in Madrid. So, and these days we're receiving more and more updates that more and more people has these problems, has this illness, disease with Hantavirus. Maybe we're at the beginning of a new problem, or maybe it's just speculations, but we will follow the situation and we will get to truth sooner or later. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.